So Rupert, the French scene or the European short-handed scene is clearly on your radar now. So where did you go from there? What transposed after that?
Well, I took a trip to France in 2019 to have a meeting with the Marc Lombard design group, who are they're the leading naval architecture group in Class 40, and one of their designs had won the Route du Rhum in 2018. So I thought, well, if I'm going to get into this stuff, I better get serious and get myself a decent boat designed and built. So flew over there and had a meeting and commissioned a new generation. The Class 40 is a box rule, so but if you team up with the naval architects who have had success within that rule previously, you've got a good chance of getting a performer.
So you got the plans, then where did you go from there?
The plans, it takes about 9 months to design the boat because they run a lot of CFD computer work for hull shapes, and then obviously there's the structural design on top of that, aero design and systems design. So we had a design by mid to late 2020, and the original plan had been to build moulds and build the hull in France, but then all the lockdowns happened. So I thought, okay, well, I'll build the boat in Australia. So we built that down in Eora, and then I fitted the boat out myself with a couple of guys helping me in terms of deck hardware and electrical, and we launched it in July 2021.
And that was
Balmain.
Eora.
That's Eora,
okay.
yeah.
But I'll go back a step.
Yeah.
The 2020 Hobart race,
Yes.
Rolex Hobart race, you'd entered Burning Palms
Right.
for that race as a double-hander.
Correct. So 2020 was when we first started
And
doing
that was going to be the
double-hand.
first time two-handers were allowed in the race.
Correct.
Although they couldn't win the overall prize at that stage.
Right.
But of course the race got cancelled.
That's it. That's the
So
one.
there was no event.
Right.
So then this boat that you had designed overseas, built here,
Yes.
was ready to go for the 21 Rolex Sydney Hobart race.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. So 2020 cancelled. That was going to be, we'd done a spring season of double-handed
Yes.
racing here at the club. It was very early days, and there was a mixed fleet. So Greg and I just raced the boat we had, which was the Burning Palms, and it races pretty well.
Yeah.
And then, so the next year we had the Class 40 Eora launched by July.
Right. So you say the Class 40 is a box rule.
Right.
Where did you get in that box? Do you say to Marc Lombard's design office, I want to be in this corner or that corner? Or do they say, this is where we feel you should fit in that box?
Well, I have no say in that. They're the experts.
Right.
But in terms of box, they basically hit the limits. Like any a bigger boat will generally go faster. So they're always max length, their max beam, their minimum weight, their maximum sail area, those sort of things. So they're basically the ratios that are going to drive performance. But within that, Lombards decide everything.
Right.
I only have input in terms of where I'd like maybe the winches to go and where I'd like to sit, and but most performance stuff is done by the naval architect. Yeah.
And for those that can remember, or those that can't remember, she was a scow to a certain extent, scow bow.
Right.
But the Class 40 are limited in how big the scow can be, or can't they? They can't have the ultimate scow like the
That's
minis.
right. There are pinch points on max beam.
Yeah.
And so measuring back from the bow, for example, 600 mil back, you can only be, I think it's 500 wide. 2.5 meters back, I think you can be 3.5 wide. So it stops you filling the rectangle up with something that looks like an aircraft carrier from above.
Yeah.
But it's pretty close. And sailing around here on the East Coast with that lumpy sea we have offshore, it's quite an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to say they're not the prettiest looking boat, but gee, they're effective, aren't they? Quick.
You forget they're a 40-footer.
Yeah.
Like the things downwind, they're doing 20 knots consistently. 16 knots, 17 knot average for a 40-footer. And upwind, once you get used to it and you sail a little bit lower, you're going very, very fast upwind, like 9.5 knots. It's 48 degrees true, 47 degrees true. Yes. So for a 40-foot, I mean, the modern naval architecture is just phenomenal. The performance you get out of boats, they're getting so quick.
So you got that organised for the 2021 Rolex Sydney Hobart.
The original plan had been to have the boat finish a little bit earlier, ship it to Europe and do the Transat Jacques Vabre, which is the double-handed transatlantic race.
Right.
but we just missed because of the COVID shipping problems
Yep.
and a little bit of delay in the build, it just wasn't possible. So I said, okay, well, we'll just campaign it here for the Hobart season, and then ship it to Europe early 22, which is what we ended up doing.
Yeah. So, but unfortunately, things didn't go quite that well for you in the Hobart race.
The whole season we had a lot of teething problems, just basically due to me trying to commission a boat in Australia, which is very refined. I didn't really appreciate it, how refined the build and rig techniques are in the class. And so we broke a mast in the Flinders Island race, and then we broke a ring frame and a backstay in the Hobart race. So just teething problems, just trying to do everything yourself. Out here, whereas not being able to draw on the knowledge and experience of the class, it's been 15 years in Europe.
Yeah.
So we learnt trial and error a lot.
So you retired from that Hobart and then shipped the boat to France
That's right.
to prepare for the Route du Rhum.
So straight after, like in early January last year, we packed the boat up, got it on a ship, and shipped it to the UK. So inside a roll-on, roll-off ship. Yeah, which worked out quite well. But the ship ran late, and we ended
Normal dramas.
we had to get the boat off at a different port to what we originally intended, up in Newcastle, northeast UK, and then truck it 9 hours on the English freeways down to Hamble. So yeah, it was a logistical experience.
But we'll talk specifically about the race, the Route du Rhum in a moment. Just explain how big the short-handed scene is in Europe and especially France.
Well, it's a big show, and largely driven. Well, it's driven by two things. First of all, there's a lot of sailors get into that short-handed offshore scene. It's like a chicken and egg thing. They're attracted to it because they like the adventure. It's part of the French culture. They reward people with adventurous natures, I suppose. And the other string in the bow is the corporates fund it heavily over there. So there are a lot of sailors over there making paid careers out of short-handed sailing from the age of about 20 through the ages of to retirement age. So it's I think it's the second or third most financially supported sport in France after football and golf. It's right up there.
But they have schools, don't they? Have sort of offshore schools to train people to.
They do.
Yeah.
Yep. So they run offshore short-handed sailing academies. So the general sailing pathway in France is once you finish your youth program at end of high school, you'll choose either you're going to go sort of an Olympic dinghy path or you're going to go to a single-handed sailing path. And so if you choose the single-handed, you generally either get into the Mini 6.5 class or into the Figaro, which is a one design offshore race. So and supporting those two classes are organisations that train the training groups, and they train on the water, and they give the skills to the young people in terms of running a boat, anything to do with that, rigging, navigation, DC wiring, problem solving afloat. So it's quite structured, and it's there's a lot of it going on.
Yeah. So you've got the boat now in Europe. Then you did a couple of two-handed races before the Route du Rhum, didn't you? There was one big race you did.
We did. What did I do? In May there was a Normandy Channel race, which is a double-handed event. It's 1,000 miles. It's like a Fastnet course, but a little bit longer.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was a real rush to get the boat commissioned in Hamble, sailed across to the start in Caen, and get into that race. But we did it, and that was the first class race I'd done in Class 40.
And your crew then was Jack.
Sailed with Jack Boutel, who's an Australian, but now he lives in France full time.
He's doing the ocean race at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, right. He's one of the 4 people on 11th Hour Racing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an excellent guy and an excellent sailor.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you did a couple of those, and then the big one in November, the Route du Rhum, single-handed,
right,
from France to Guadeloupe.
Yep. So in between May and November, there was one main race which was called the Dream Cup, which is 1,000 miles single-handed. Again, it's in northern France, so it's like kind of like an extended Fastnet, but you finish back down in Brittany.
Right.
So you go around Finistère and Ushant and Ouessant, and you finish down in La Trinité-sur-Mer.
Yeah, and you did quite well in that, didn't you?
I got 12th out of 40 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So that was okay. It was my first single-handed race ever.
Yeah.
But I learned along the way.
Right.
It was good. Had a really nice run back from Fastnet down to Brittany in 30 knots, big northern Celtic Sea.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the Route du Rhum, the start was delayed, 3 or 4 days because of foul weather. It starts in November, which is, the start of winter in Europe, isn't it? So it's a funny time to start that race, isn't it?
Right. Well, I think it's as soon as you can sort of feasibly get away from northern Europe without the chance of running into a hurricane or a cyclone in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So that's kind of sets the departure window, and it's sort of at the end of the autumnal gales as well.
Right.
So you get those relentless sou'westers coming through, and the race is meant to be 6th of November, and there is a big tropical, some sort of depression over towards Newfoundland, and that just set itself up coming right across the Atlantic. Like the seas they get over there are quite enormous, and so they postponed it wisely because the single-handed multi-hulls, you can end up upside down, and they were worried they could have lost people. So 3 days later, everyone set off, and it was still a big sea state and very windy, but manageable.
But in your class 40, how many entries were there? There was
55. Yeah. It's a tough time of year to start, like you say, because you're only getting 8 hours of daylight per day. Yeah. So you learn how to sail at night pretty well.
So off we go with boats everywhere. What happened?
Well, it started in the afternoon, and it's very close, 55 fleet racing going along the coast. First thing I saw of interest was two yacht class 40s right near me collided on a reef. Like, literally. I saw navigation lights pointing the wrong way, and it looked like two boats were having a little kiss. Then I realised they were both aground. So those guys were out, and then, it went on from there. So that's working along the northern coast of France towards Ouessant. Yeah. And then you turn left, I think, do we go inside or outside Ouessant? I can't remember. But then you start to work your way across the Bay of Biscay, past Spain and Portugal. And yeah. So
you were hanging in there, but then things didn't work out too well.
It was pretty disappointing. We had a structural failure in the boat and had to pull out after the best part of a week. Yeah. Sailed back to Spain 500 miles and got on the first plane home.
Well, disappointing, but it's still a brave effort. But the class 40, I think the first class 40 was 17th overall to finish in the whole fleet. Amongst those.
They're fast, yeah.
All the fleet,
Right, I didn't realise that.
Yeah. Okay. So.
They get along really nicely once you get used to the jarring ride, because that was upwind that first week, and I think after I stopped, the other guys had another 3 or 4 days of solid upwind before it freed up a bit.
Yeah.
So you can't stand up in the boat. It is full on, and because the fronts are coming through, you got to get up to the mast to make the tack for a reef. You just feel like a gecko trying to get along the side deck and get to the tack. Yeah. So it's really, and it's freezing. The fronts come through from the front. It's not like what you have here. The fronts come through, might be blowing southwest then, and then the front comes through and it's suddenly blowing west. So it's not like a reversal of wind. So you end up straight into the old seaway after a front, and the front passes through with 45 knots and blinding rain and about 8 degrees. So it's a bit of fun.
Tough going, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough going. Yeah.
So where's the boat now? Is it back? It's back in France, is it? Or
it's back on its cradle in La Trinité-sur-Mer.
Right.
Yeah, I'm actually in discussions with the naval architects about designing a new hull.
Oh, right.
For next time around.
Does your wife know?
Does now.
Fair enough. So, okay, so we've got that class 40 there, but you came back and got Mistral ready for the Hobart race, the last one, 2022,
right.
Rolex Hobart race with Greg again.
Yes. And
set off, and she's a 34-footer.
Right.
And you won two-handed division in the Hobart race.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Had a ball. Some good sailing.
I'll pose a theoretical question to you. If you'd had the class 40 in the Hobart race, the recent Hobart race, how do you think you would have gone before? Where would you have ended up in the fleet, do you think? I mean, it's a hard question to ask and hard to answer, but...
It's a good question.
Because you had a lot of downwind early.
Had a lot of downwind.
And you were right there until the front came through and clobbered you.
I mean, it's always a big if, right?
Yeah,
but theoretically, I think we would have got round Tasman before it shifted.
Do you?
Yeah, because in the Mistral, we were off a latitude of about St Mary's, which is south of Eddystone and north of Bicheno, somewhere around there, before it clocked round and we had to go upwind. So we sailed upwind in that boat, I think 80 miles up the coast, 80 or 90 miles upwind.
And you would have been...
The Class 40
around.
would have been...
You could have been around.
It's hard to say.
Yeah,
because...
I know,
I mean, we were going very slowly in the 34-footer. We covered some good ground.
Yes.
But I'd say, who knows?
But you're always, you're looking at the skeds, you're always in the top dozen or so on handicap in Mistral until you got clobbered.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
it would have been a good weather system for a downwind boat like a Class 40. Yeah.
And let's talk about your win. Was it a hard race? I mean, early on you were scooting along. Everyone was scooting along with nor'easters, weren't they?
We were.
Yeah.
The first night was lighter than what any of us expected. But from sort of lunchtime on the 27th or late morning, it really built and built. The seaway built, the wind built, and we just progressively went down from Big Spinnaker to A4 to Chicken Shoot, and that got us all the way to on port, and then we jibed bareheaded.
Right.
And it was solid breeze when we jibed, like a lot of breeze, a lot of waves. Yeah.
So the question's always asked, autopilot. How much did you use the autopilot in a race like that?
We used the autopilot quite a bit in the first day and first night because it was lightish. But once you get to on the limit sailing with a boat like Mistral, we hand steered the rest of the race.
Did you?
Yeah, because if you want to set up a boat properly for autopilot sailing, you'd have the rudders on a transom, like an IMOCA or like a Class 40, get better helm response. Yeah. Whereas the Mistral has the rudders forward, so steer's okay, but when you're fully lit up and carrying the biggest sail you can, you've got to steer by hand. Yeah.
So you said rudders plural. You had a drama with one of your rudders, didn't you, in the Hobart race?
Right.
The port rudder, I think, was it? Port.
Yeah, coming back on starboard, leeward rudder, port rudder. Yes. So
what happened?
We drive back in to wanted to be back on the coast before the front came, and after a few hours, the top rudder bearing on the leeward rudder, which is doing all the work, decided to part company with the deck. So and it started the bearing is in a bracket underneath the deck, but the stock comes through with a cap on it, and it just started to route out a nice hole in the aft deck, which promptly let all the water coming in fill up the lazarette. So we stopped, bowed that out, thought the race was over. We're just trying to work out where we could try and make landfall before the front, which at that speed wouldn't have been possible. But anyway, after we settled down, after a couple of hours, we lashed the rudder stock off and just limped in towards the coast. And gradually the breeze died, and then came around to on the nose. And then when you're on the nose, the rudders are less loaded than pushing it hard downwind. So we just struggled home like that. Yeah.
Got the victory, but also amongst the fleet was your father, David.
Sure was.
Racing two-handed as well.
Yeah.
In a Sydney 38?
Sydney 36.
36, yeah. That's a very good performance.
Yeah, tremendous effort.
Does your mother worry? Husband's out there, your son's out there?
I don't think they worry for our safety. I think my mum just worries that she's getting left out of the fun because they sailed around the world together in their cruising yachts. So I think mum feels a bit left out when it comes to the racing.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got Burning Palms here, the J65. You've got Eora in France. You've got Mistral here.
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. Expensive nightmare. But so what's next? Where are we going next?
Well, what's next is the Mistral's having a little refit done. Just having a new mast made. It should arrive later in the year, and just a few little. I haven't had that boat that long, so just a few little tweak ups at the moment. And I'm actually planning on sailing to Fiji in May on Burning Palms.
Great.
It should be fun.
Lovely.
So try and have the boat up there for the season.
And what about this year's Hobart race? Any thoughts yet?
Well, no thoughts, but it'll probably be the same as last year. We're going to do it double-handed in Mistral.
Right.
Yeah.
You won't get the Class 40 back?
No, that boat will stay there.
Will it?
Like, it's all about class racing with that, not handicap racing.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. I love it.
Yeah. And the class is just booming over there, isn't it, the Class 40?
It's really booming, and to the point where it's hard to get a design or a build. There are 3 or 4 boat building companies that can put them out to the quality you need, and they're all chock-a-block. Yeah.
So we've seen the growth in short-handed sailing in Europe, and it's coming here to Australia. Do you think it'll continue to grow here?
I think so. I mean, if you look at new boats being launched, new race boats being launched, most of them are in that production double-handed offshore space in the 30 to 36 foot range, and because it's a lot of fun, and second of all, it's affordable, and and crew's getting harder to find as well. Like to race a TP well, you need 12 hot guys.
Yeah, good guys.
Yeah,
sure.
minimum plus extras, and that's just getting harder and harder to find. So I think it's got it's all blue sky for it.
Well, Rupert, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we wish you success in whatever boat you choose. Safe sailing, and good luck for the rest of the year, and maybe the Hobart race. Who knows? Might see you number one again. Good luck, and thanks again, Rupert.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Peter. Good talking.